Welcome to The Record. I'm Mark Maxwell. Our top story this week, an all too common occurrence in modern America, the mayhem of a mass shooting and the madness in the aftermath. One 17-year-old teen is dead, another 17-year-old facing criminal charges, and 11 others, ages 15 to 19, were injured with gunfire or trampled trying to escape that scene. St. Louis Mayor Tishaura Jones met the media and called for tougher gun laws on Father's Day Sunday.
Our problems don't stop at the Mississippi or Missouri rivers, and neither should our solutions. We also know that our state's lax gun laws make our challenge even more difficult. Despite a bipartisan push this session and the hard work of the St. Louis delegation, the Missouri legislature failed to restrict minors from carrying guns, a common sense solution to keep dangerous weapons out of the hands of children. The legislature's lack of action on gun safety laws encourages the proliferation of guns on our streets and puts our responding officers directly in harm's way.
Joining us now is Secretary of State Jay Ashcroft on The Record, and also a leading Republican candidate for governor in Missouri. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
A tragedy happened earlier this week in the city of St. Louis, and I know that you've spoken some about public safety, but I think many voters might want to get a better idea how you think about these issues. Let's start here. Should you become governor of Missouri, would you be a one-size-fits-all governor, or would you recognize that some policies might fit better in different communities across the state?
I think it depends on the policy. There are certain things where, I believe in life. I want to protect all lives from conception to natural death. So there it's a one policy. In other areas, I think you should have what works best for the community. It just depends on the data and the facts on the ground.
Well, one example might be you could walk down the rural dirt roads of Iron County with a long gun in your hand, a rifle, but should you be able to walk down the streets of urban St. Louis with an AR-15?
I don't see why it's a problem.
You don't?
No. The AR-15, the long gun, whatever it is, isn't the problem. The problem we have is with individuals. I mean, you look at this tragedy, and it was not a good thing. There are moms and dads, brothers and sisters that are in agony because of what happened. I think you have at least one individual that was killed. There was reports that another individual might be somewhat paralyzed from being trampled. That's horrendous. But what you had were individuals that were, let me see, it sounds like they broke the law to break into this building. It sounds like they were partying at 1 o'clock in the morning. They were both adults and youngish to middle-ish teenagers. I mean, there were countless laws that were broken. This isn't about a gun causing this. There were multiple guns recorded. Several people were shooting. All these people had no problem with shooting someone else.
At the time of this conversation, we still don't know exactly how they gained access into the building. There could have been breaking.
There are indications. We don't know for sure. That's true.
Police are still piecing some of that together. But let's look at the policy.
Not a whole lot good happens when you're out as a teenager at 1 o'clock in the morning.
My basketball coach used to say the same thing, and certainly there's some wisdom there. But I think what we want to get at is what can government do in policy making? Surely there are some folks who will break any and all laws. And I think that's part of the argument you're making. I don't know that it applies to everyone. You think laws do work, don't you?
I think laws can be helpful. I think we've seen the breakdown of law and order in St. Louis City, where criminals are not being charged, where criminals are not being put away, where we're letting criminals go, and we're essentially confining law-abiding citizens to their houses because they don't feel safe when they leave.
So let's look at this issue, because you have to be 19 years old to apply for a concealed carry permit in Missouri. But there's a catch. You don't actually have to have a concealed carry permit to carry a concealed weapon. Would you, in 2016 or 2017 when it took effect, would you have signed that bill into law that Governor Greitens did that dropped the requirement for a concealed carry permit?
Sure. I think that's in accordance with the Second Amendment to the United States Constitution. And once again, I'd go back that this isn't about whether or not someone had a concealed carry permit or not. This was about individuals that were already breaking the laws. We need to enforce the laws we have, not write more laws that will get in the way of law-abiding officials, but do nothing to stop those individuals that will willingly and happily break the law from committing these atrocities.
I want to test that theory in a minute, but first I want to check in with something that Congresswoman Cori Bush said on Monday this week. She's calling on Republicans in Jefferson City to do more.
There's an assault weapons ban legislation. We want them to vote yes on it. There is legislation, we would love to see, and there's legislation out there, increase that federally, that limit, the age limit on firearms from 18 to 21. Increase that number. We will save lives. When we talk about locally, there's so much that can be done locally in our state house, our state assembly that is not happening. Like, start that now.
Do you see any space at all for more proactive policing just to remove the guns from these dangerous scenarios? Is there any space for that proactive policing before the shooting starts?
Proactive policing, that can look different for different people. Police respond to crime, and we understand that. I don't believe that police should go around trying to stop people and trying to take guns from people. That is not, because we have enough problems with stop and frisk in this country, and so it can easily turn into something we do not want.
How do you evaluate those remarks from Congresswoman Bush?
I think they're very political. I think that she's not trying to actually solve the problem. If you look at what happened in the city of New York, which can be a great example for how you should do things, stop and frisk saved lives. Stop and frisk stopped crimes. It got criminals off the street, and it made it so law-abiding citizens could enjoy their city again. The idea that we want to make it illegal for people to have guns, but then we won't let the police stop people if they illegally have guns, that's so convoluted, I can't understand it.
But you don't, right now, the laws don't allow police to interject. Or when would a police officer actually approach a person legally in Missouri right now?
Well, if you look at stop and frisk laws that have been done in the past, the Supreme Court has set out guidelines that we could talk about at a later date if you want. It's a little bit technical as to what you can do to do that without invading the rights of individuals.
Under the example we used a minute ago, if you're carrying an AR-15 down the street, that wouldn't qualify.
That in and of itself, I don't think would be enough.
Or if you were 17 years old. Or 14
Why
years old.
should we stop people just because they're 17-year-olds from walking down the street?
Well, if the law at one point said you had to be 19 to apply for a concealed carry permit, I think it stands to reason. The legislature said that's probably a reasonable age.
Well, there's always a difference between concealed carry and open carry, and you're saying we should stop someone for open carrying because they don't have a concealed carry permit? That doesn't make sense.
That's what leaders in St. Louis are deliberating right now, whether or not they can do that. So it's an active question right now.
Well, look, as I've said before, the problem is not a lack of laws. Mm-hmm. The problem is a lack of law enforcement. The problem, frankly, some of it is a problem of values. How are we teaching our kids to respect life? Are we teaching our kids that going out and partying at 1 o'clock in the night with probably alcohol, quite possibly drugs, we don't know, don't want to, and doing that with firearms is not a good thing to do. And it would appear, although we don't know, that they broke into the facility to do this. I mean, this is not something where more laws will solve the problem. They were violating laws already.
The chief of police in St. Louis disagrees with you. He says this.
It should be prohibited that juveniles do not carry guns. It should be prohibited. This is the first state and city that I come to where juveniles are not prohibited. It should at least mirror the federal law. So let's start there. And I think they tried to do that, and we had talked, and the mayor and I and her administration been down to Jeff City many times talking about the seriousness of this issue, and I think they tried to get it across, and the mayor hit on it, that they weren't able to do it this time. But we're going to keep pushing because we think it's too important to make sure that we at least start there, and I think that's reasonable.
Do you agree with Chief Tracy?
What federal law says that juveniles can't carry weapons?
The federal law passed in the 1960s, I believe. The firearms, I'm going to miss the acronym, but there's a safety act that says juveniles under the age of cannot possess weapons, cannot handguns here. Long guns they can, under adult supervision, under certain circumstances.
You got me a little confused because you're talking about AR-15s, which are long guns, and now we're going to pistols. So it seems like it's a little bit of a moving
AR-15s were seen being carried down the street. The weapons involved in the recent shooting were handguns.
Okay, most of the time, if you look at crime statistics, it's not AR-15s. They may be, quote, spooky-looking weapons, but they don't cause problems. Look, am I the only one that sees that on one hand, we're saying we need more laws, but they were already violating the laws? Criminals don't follow the law by definition.
Well, lawmakers in Missouri say don't enforce federal gun laws here. So there's an obstacle, not cooperation.
Those people were already violating the law. The chief of police that you just quoted was saying all we need to do is pass another law. Mm-hmm. That's not working. These people
I don't
were
think he's saying
already
all.
violent.
I don't think he's saying,
He
give us
said
the
that would be
tools
the
to enforce.
first step or something.
Yeah.
But clearly these individuals were already violating the law. Murder is already against the law. Shooting a weapon, a firearm at someone with the intent to kill them or trying to kill them or in a reckless manner is already against the law. Breaking an entry is against the law. This isn't about firearms laws. This is about individuals that were seemingly hell-bent on violating the law, and they did that.
So you make the point that murder is already outlawed. And
Yes, and it should be outlawed.
Thank you for clarifying. I hear that point. But to prosecute a murderer, you have to first catch them. Talk to any prosecutor. They will tell you the thing they need most to make their case is what? Evidence.
Well, in the city of St. Louis, we need a prosecutor that will prosecute crimes.
That's the whole issue.
And I'm glad that we have a new circuit attorney. But probably some of what we're seeing is from the laxity of the prosecuting attorney's office of not prosecuting crimes that had occurred previously. And I'd really be interested to see how many people that were involved in this incident should have been prosecuted for prior crimes and should have, in a reasonable society, been behind bars at the time of this occurrence.
All of those things are possible, but prosecutors and police.
Probable.
Prosecutors and police are likely to come to the legislature, and should you become governor, ask for your signature on pieces of legislation that would say, give us the tools we need to make this case, including and up to being able to track when weapons are sold, being able to track where they are. If weapons are used in the commission of a crime, shouldn't the state take an interest in knowing where that gun came from?
Look, once a gun as evidence is used in a crime, they're definitely going to do that.
Isn't it too late at that point?
I am not in favor of some sort of overwatch surveillance, if you will, by the governments against law-abiding officials. We need to enforce the laws that we have. We need to put individuals that are criminals that have violated the law behind bars. We need to put the citizens of St. Louis City ahead of criminals. We've got to do that first.
I always appreciate a conversation with you, especially because it gives our audience a peek behind the curtain into how you think about these important matters. One other big political thing happening in recent days is the second, not a state, but now a federal indictment of former President Donald Trump. I'm going to read you a quote from the former Attorney General that he appointed, Bill Barr. He said that this was, quote, entirely of his own making and, quote, not the result of unfair government prosecution. Many of our viewers may know your dad held that job at one point. Is Bill Barr right?
Unfortunately, look, Bill Barr has worked to honorably serve our government and our nation. Unfortunately, he seems blind to the fact that we have at least a two-tiered, if not a three-tiered system of justice in this country. And I think the onus is definitely on the Department of Justice to prove that they were going after a crime, not after an individual.
Well, certainly that's always the case. But can you
more
support
so than ever. Look, the largest purveyor of disinformation and misinformation over the last 5 to 10 years has been the federal government. Our FBI, our security services have been part and parcel of that, and that strikes to the very heart of our nation, and we need to find a way to get past that and for people to be able to trust those systems again.
I want to make sure I'm hearing you clearly. Can you support a candidate for president who is under federal indictment?
I will vote for the best person I can, and if there is an indictment, that is the prosecutor saying what they say, we have to wait for the defense, we have to wait for the court, but as the old saying goes, look, you can indict a ham sandwich. So if it's that easy, then that would just say that Joe Biden can have anybody he wants indicted and he won't have to run against him. That's what happens in banana republics. That's not what should happen in the United States of America.
And we didn't even have time to get into the primary contest of this running for governor, but we do thank you for stopping by the studio.
Thanks for having me.